agenda. Any questions about that? You have a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Second, approval of minutes, September 17th. Need a motion to approve that, if there's any questions about it.
We do all three in one vote, or do we have to do something?
Well, if there's questions about it, any of them. No questions about any of the
No
agendas?
questions for the minutes, no.
Okay, we can have a motion for all of them then.
Make a motion first to approve the minutes for all three from September 17th, October 22nd, and November 19th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Third is CZ 24.10.01. Assembly of God requested conditional rezoning for 6800 Stevens Mill Road from SFR 1 to CZMU 1 to construct and expand daycare center and religious uses on the site. Yes, sir.
Hey, good afternoon, Planning Board. So like you said, this is a conditional rezoning application for CZ 241001, Assembly of God. So this is a conditional rezoning request. As you can see there on the right, there's an area of the property. It's located on Stevens Mill Road. I'll go over the site details in a second. But they are requesting single-family residential rezoning to conditional zoning mixed-use 1 for the continuation of religious and daycare uses, and they would like to expand as well. And I'll go into detail about the zoning categories in a later slide. But I did want to go over what is a conditional zoning. I know some of you are new to planning board, and this is going to be our first conditional zoning. But there are differences between a conditional zoning and a general rezoning. A conditional zoning is a specific development rezoning that has a site plan attached to it where they can request alleviation from certain ordinance requirements, but in return, staff, council, planning board can suggest additional conditions on the site plan that are reasonable. So for example, I put here, if they would like a taller building than the ordinances allow, we may ask them to provide an amenity like a park in exchange. General rezoning is a little bit different, where you rezone from one category to the other, but you have to follow the specific ordinance requirements that are located in the ordinance. And then please let me know if you have any questions about the nuances during the presentation between conditional zoning and general. Because the second item is a general rezoning. This is the conditional one. For the meetings for conditional zoning, there's 4 required. We had a neighborhood meeting on November 6th. We had our subcommittee meeting on November 12th. Let me back up. The neighborhood meeting is the meeting for the 500 feet was mailed. Everybody within 500 feet was mailed for that neighborhood meeting, and we had a public meeting here in this building. Subcommittee meetings for council members. So those are 3 council members that are attending that meeting, where they can kind of talk to the developer or submittee about their request. Tonight's the planning board, and then we have the council hearing on January 27th. And I put TBD there because that meeting's up to council if they would like to hear it or not, and they can change the date if they need to. Current conditions of the site. On the left is an aerial, and on the right is a municipal map. As you can see, the Stallings is in pink, the light blue is Indian Trail, and then if there's no color on this, it's in Union County. Here's a little bit more site data. So 6800 Stevens Mill, their existing use is religious, and it's 24.475 acres. And their current site plan doesn't meet our traffic generation counts for 1,000 daily trips in a day or 100 on peak hours. So they don't have any traffic generation at this point required. Here's their site plan. I've actually also put at each of you a larger site plan so you can see in detail. But this site plan is split just in detail, but on the top is just a very close-up of what they want to do. The darker building is that new daycare building. The other light gray building on the right is the existing church, and they want to expand their parking lot. They also want to add, or we're requesting them to add a greenway trail up front, or a greenway trail master plan requires them to install a greenway. Additionally, the bottom portion shows the entire site, and it shows mostly floodplain in the rear. They are requesting alleviation from the greenway trail that goes through the floodplain, and I'll go into detail on that floodplain on the floodplain slide. The land use for this property is single-family residential 1, and it's inconsistent with its current zoning designation, future land use designation, and the zoning designation doesn't allow religious or daycare use, so that's why they're doing the conditional zoning. Per Greenway Master Plan, they are required to put a greenway trail along Stevens Mill and through the floodplain, but the floodplain portion doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't even have a connection point through, it goes through Indian Trail, and so staff thinks it's reasonable to request alleviation from this rear floodplain portion. But we did request them to continue with that front Stevens Mill portion. These are conditions that I developed after talking and discussing this with some public comments. Additionally, after the subcommittee meeting with the council members, I've added lighting restrictions so they don't illuminate other properties. The permitted uses would be daycare and religious, and they'd be able to expand those uses. Greenway and easement would be required for the front, and then easement along the back in case the town wanted to build a greenway trail network in the future. At this time, there's no plans for a greenway trail network that connects into Indian Trail, but we wanted to request that in case in the future there would be. The traffic impact condition I put in there for engineering, and if they expand their site enough to hit those traffic generation numbers, then they would be required to submit traffic generation at that point. And then there's some additional conditions, like they have to get all the necessary permits, metal buildings aren't allowed, and then they also have approval valid for 5 years. They'd have to start the development within 5 years. Yes?
What is their anticipated, what's their current daycare population versus what's their anticipated daycare population with the growth change?
Yeah, so they're actually here tonight. I'll let them talk about the daycare. I do remember that we did discuss that at the last meeting. I just can't remember the exact number.
Right, so this is the number was, right.
Yeah, I'll let them
Okay,
talk
cool.
about that. So staff recommends approval of CZ 2410.01 with the addition of the staff conditions presented in the previous slide. We do believe this request is inconsistent, but it is reasonable with the future land use plan. They're not changing their current use. It doesn't alter, the floodplain limits future development on this property too. So maintaining the current use does protect the surrounding properties. And before voting and the applicants to talk, do you have any questions of me for this?
One other question, as it pertains to the floodplain in the back of the property, and perhaps this is better for the representatives, but I'll ask you anyway.
Yeah.
Does that land, would it support construction of additional structures back there, or is it not able to be used?
Yeah, so there is very strict applications for floodplain management. We don't allow buildings on the floodplain, and I think engineering would have to approve that, and they would likely approve that as well. And they'd also have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers and other, and CDEQ and all these other different approvals to be able to build on the floodplain. And it's such a large floodplain, I don't assume that it could be easy to do. I mean, it would also be really expensive.
Thank you.
And if they have any plans for the floodplain, then I would ask them as well.
Just in the lighting, is it gonna be typically what we see in other common areas or parking lots and grocery stores and so forth, it's basically facing straight down? Flat top, straight down.
So I don't have that specifically mentioned on the type of exact lighting, but the lighting will likely be that because they're not allowed to illuminate other properties per the conditions, and this is monitored by code enforcement.
Right. Okay.
Oh, this would be monitored by code enforcement.
Thank you.
Mr. Banks, you said there was a neighborhood meeting with this?
There was.
Is there a summary of that?
There is a summary, yes. I don't remember. I don't know if I submitted it to you, but I can pull that up for you if you'd like to see
Was
it.
there anything significant in the summary of that, that we should
I
done?
think anybody attended that meeting.
Okay.
No one was in
Okay, okay.
attendance. Okay, well, the applicant's here, if you'd like,
Sure.
to speak.
Applicant?
You want to speak?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alal Ghanem. I'm the architect representing Pastor Sandro, who is the pastor of the church. I think Max did a good job representing all of it, so I'm just gonna answer any questions you have for me.
It's the, when going back to the population of
Number
the
of
acres
kids.
and what it is now versus what it would be currently projected.
So right now, they're at 69, so around 70, and with this new building, they're approved to go up to 100 from a licensing standpoint. And so it'll be a 30-kid increase.
Are you prepared to go forward with the construction of the greenway on the front of the property?
Yes, we're proposing that as a part of the site plan. Yes, sir.
Great.
Any other questions? Thank you. Good.
I was just gonna, the floodplain situation, just to address that, I don't think the pastor or the church are prepared to build on the floodplain. That's gonna, the site is too big, and pushing infrastructure all the way to reach the floodplain would be very expensive, kind of just piggyback on what Max was saying. That, I just wanted to comment about that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Okay, we need a motion, either approve or deny.
I move that we approve the request and find that it is inconsistent but reasonable with the comprehensive land use plan.
Second?
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next agenda item is RZ 224.10.01, Stevens Village LLC requested general rezoning for 5749 Stevens Mill Road from SFR1 to MU2.
Yeah, before we do that one, I just wanted to pull up the statement of consistency for the last meeting so that it was visible for the public to view. I just have to pull it up, and so they know that it's here. But I will go ahead and continue with the next item now.
And just for clarity's sake, anybody who didn't get the chance to read it on the screen, it's available on the website.
It's available
Okay.
online, yes. So this, like you said, is a general rezoning application for RZ 2410.01 at 5749 Stevens Mill Road. This is a general rezoning request. Stevens Village LLC, the applicant is here as well. It requests a general rezoning from single-family residential 1 to mixed-use 2 at a parcel 0.78 acres in size at 5749 Stevens Mill Road. We had a neighborhood meeting at December 5th, and there was a large turnout for that meeting, and then tonight's planning board, and then we have the council hearing on January 27th, and that's to be determined. This is the aerial of the site, and I can zoom in a little bit more if you'd like on Google Maps or on an aerial, but there's a white house there, and I know some of you live close by, so you might know where this white house is on Stevens Mill Road, across from the church and Hemby Bridge. It's very close to the intersection of Idlewild and Stevens Mill, near Shanamora. So there is 2 history slides on this. So back in 2018, the town adopted a new development ordinance and did a mass rezoning of the entire town. And these properties were rezoned from R20, which is residential, it's very similar to SFR1, and they were rezoned to mixed use 2. Due to property tax values increasing, these properties shown on the screen requested a rezoning to single-family residential 1, and that was approved on September 27th, 2021. There's additional history as well. So the Stevens Village project, or Cambridge Hall, and I'll let the developer kind of solidify the name on that. It's composed of 2 different parts. There's a by right development, which is a allowed use per the mixed use 2 zoning, which is the commercial grocery anchor. This is can be built without any additional approvals from council. There's also a development agreement portion that we're not just, we're not rezoning or doing a development agreement tonight about, but I did want to make sure that you knew that there was something in the works for that. It was submitted in 2020, and that is still TBD on the dates on when we're going to hear that item. This site plan was submitted September 11th in 2020, and the concept plan was approved on October 20th, 2023. Due to COVID-19 delays, the TIA began the year after the submittal in November 2021 and was completed in July 2023, and that's why there was such a long delay between the original submittal and when it was approved. I did want to let you know that just kind of some more project summary data. The site is located in this red circle here. The existing use is residential, and it's surrounded by mixed-use 2 zoning in the green. 0.878 acres, and there is no traffic generation required for this specific general rezoning, because there's no site plan for this general rezoning at this time.
What's the current usage of the adjacent properties?
I believe they're residential at the moment, but I don't know if the developer, I know they own the properties, I don't know if they rent it out.
Okay.
I would ask them if they're.
So the
it.
adjacent properties are owned by the developer? Okay.
Correct. So the future land use for this site is single family neighborhood, but back when it was rezoned to single family residential in 2021, it was changed. So every time we do a rezoning, we have to change the future land use as well. So the previous future land use was pink, which is walkable activity center, which would promote commercial. But once they rezoned to single family residential, we had to change the future land use as well. This is the Idlewild Road small area plan. I know it's kind of a lot of colors, but those properties in this red circle, and it's identified as single family detached or attached. The yellows are very difficult to view. And I did want to give you a little bit of history for the small area plan. When this was adopted in 2018 as well, all properties within the small area plan were rezoned mixed use too. We have 5 small area plans in town, and most of those properties are all zoned mixed use too, as a result of those adoption of the small area plans. Like on 74, and we also have another small area plan near the school, which is zoned mixed use 1. So staff recommendation. So we do recommend. We know this seems inconsistent, but the future land use was previously permitted or planned to be walkable activity center, which would have been consistent, but now it's inconsistent. And then the surrounding area is also zoned commercial, and the property itself was previously zoned mixed use too. There are some additional plans that are adopted by the town that I do have to enforce, like the economic development plan when I make my decision. We currently have an 80% residential, 20% commercial tax base, and even though this parcel is small, it does help us reach that goal of 84 residential. Oh, excuse me, sorry. The town's currently 84% residential, 16% commercial, and the goal is to raise that commercial to 20%. So every small rezoning does help us meet that economic growth goal. This also rezoning provides a seamless transition to the adjacent mixed-use 2 zoning and the overall approved site plan next door, or next to the property. Do you have any questions for staff?
I just wanted to give y'all a backstory, because I was on council when we rezoned this back to residential, and it was only because the owners of the house were having trouble paying the taxes on it, so we rezoned it back to residential so that they could afford their taxes. But now that they're not going to be living there, then they don't need that favor anymore, I guess.
I believe that, yeah,
We were trying to do them a favor at the time.
So they no longer own the house?
What?
They no longer live there, they no longer own the house?
I don't believe so, but I'll let the developer kind of go into detail about that ownership of that parcel.
I know there are several properties along that corridor of development that are residential/commercial, where does this one stand as far as being far along relative to others? Asking that question, looking for the town to get to that 80-20 number.
Yeah, so there are a few different developments nearby. So I think the developer also represents Stinson Farms, which is another property, that's commercial and residential, primarily residential, and that has a development agreement, so I went through a little bit of a different process. I think, according to the developer, I wanna let them also speak on this, but I think that one's a little bit farther along. That one has approved construction document, or preliminary approved construction documents. And I think the sewer capacity might be available sooner for that one, according to the developer. I have not spoken to Union County about sewer capacity yet on that property, and I have a meeting with them later this week. But this property, if it was to be attached, or speaking of the attached commercial development, that only has a concept plan approved, and they'd have to submit construction documents next, and they have not done so yet. So they have done step 1 through 3 for us, but Stinson Farms in 2 steps out of the 3 that we need. If that helps answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Max?
Well, the developer's here as well.
Sure.
I think you'd like to speak, if that's okay.
Good evening, planning board. I'm here as a part of a team representing Stevens Village LLC. We have Terry Williams here, Nick Bouchon, John Carmichael, and I'm Aaron Houck. So thank you for having us here tonight. Again, this is concerning a parcel along Stevens Mill Road. It's 0.78 acres. It's to the northeast of the intersection of Stevens Mill Road and Idlewild Road. Here's an aerial of kind of the same perspective. You can see the homes of Shannamara here and Stevens Mill Road, the church across the street. I'll zoom out a little bit farther. Here's the site. Again, here's the parcel. Here's Idlewild Road going up to 485. Here's the Harris Teeter. As Max explained, and thank you for giving the context on the site that we're talking about is this 0.78 acre site that's currently zoned SFR1 along Stevens Mill Road, surrounded by land that's zoned MU2, and that's what we're seeking is a rezoning, a general rezoning from SFR1 to MU2. Again, here's a bigger picture of the zoning map, and you can see how the other parcels on this side of Stevens Mill Road are currently zoned MU2. And again, this is the future land use map that Max already showed as well, where this site, consistent with its current zoning, is here, and the surrounding area is this pink walkable area. So what we're seeking, again, is a general rezoning from SFR1, the current zoning district, to MU2, mixed use 2 zoning district. It's a general rezoning request, so there's not a site plan associated with it, and we're glad to answer any questions you may have about the site and the request.
I'll follow up with the question I asked Max earlier. So the adjacent properties are, let's see.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, so the ones like the houses that are right next to it on either side, those are owned by the same?
They are.
And what are the plans for those are those houses going to be demolished and replaced with commercial?
So there's an approved plan for the commercial shopping center that incorporates those properties that are on either side.
I guess what my question is if this were not approved, are we going to end up with an orphaned piece of property that, is now going to be inconsistent with what's surrounding it?
I think that's right. I mean, if it remained as SFR1, the land would probably remain as a single-family residential home.
But surrounded by commercial development.
Surrounded by commercial development.
And owned by y'all.
And still owned by the developer and rented.
So it's currently occupied.
It's occupied. The previous owners, the developer closed on the property fairly recently. In fact, when we first submitted the application, it hadn't closed yet, so the property owners were a part of the application for the rezoning when it was initially submitted. Subsequently, the developers closed on the property, and so, but the sellers, the former owners are still there and living there, until they can find another place to live.
Next question for you. Do we require, since it's in the, adjacent to a neighborhoods on both sides from your other plan, do we require buffer zones at all between that?
So for, yes, we do. So mixed use too, between mixed use and residential, they're required to do a 40-foot buffer. On the approved site plan that's adjacent to this parcel, they have an average, I think they go a little bit above 40 feet. I do have the site plan up if you do need to see it. But they're proposing certain distances of 30 and certain distances of 70 feet of buffer. And an average of 40, which is required.
40, okay.
So would the buffer zone you're referencing go around, would like have to go around, kind of cocoon this piece of property?
With
So-
that
With the current zoning?
The yellow dotted line that was on that one.
Oh, I see, for this specific
Yeah.
This
property.
specific
Yeah, they
parcel?
wouldn't be required since this is, yes, they are required to do the 40 foot around this property.
Okay.
I apologize, yes.
Is that what that yellow dotted?
Sorry, I was thinking about the
Perimeter?
Shanamara residents, sorry.
Okay.
But yes, they would have to have a buffer around this part.
Okay, so bringing this into the mixed-use zoning would eliminate that requirement too, or was that already locked into the pre-approved development plan?
It's locked in, but if they did submit a new concept plan,
Mhm.
it could be amended.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
And we have public
Sure.
here too.
Now we'll go, turn into the public
Actually,
section.
I do have, sorry, I have one more question for Mr. Howe. Along the lines of the future plan for the site, that line of houses there on Stevens Mill Road, where does that fit into what that will eventually look like as a developed plaza with all of the entities that you have planned going in there? Like, is that an entryway, or does it stay as just a tree line to the road? Like, what does it look like?
The current plan or the plan if this is rezoned as well?
If it's rezoned?
I don't know, yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, there is no plan yet. This is to have the ability to reconfigure and maximize, or not maximize, just to be more efficient instead of wrapping around an existing single-family structure.
Got it, thank you.
Okay.
We'll now hear from the public. If you wish to address the board, you raise your hand, and I'll select you to come up, and there's a 3-minute limit on each person. Okay?
Limit for 3 minutes, sir?
Yes, sir. This way, everybody has a chance to.
State your name.
Please name your, state your name and address.
Tom Twitchell, 910 Bailey Court in Shanamara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening to the members of the board. We have, our home is located on that plan bordering.
Excuse me, is it okay if I stand? I'm his wife, and I also live in 910 Bailey Court.
One person speak?
Sure,
Okay, thank you.
go ahead.
We understand that the immediate motion before the board is about the specific parcel, about having that zone to MU from SFR1. The reason that we're here tonight is the mass rezoning behind that includes the entire development, was such as a mass zoning that wasn't required to or disseminated to the public at large. So our first knowledge, and many of the homeowners in Shanamara, which will be impacted by this site, our first exposure to that was the meeting a few weeks back. This being rezoned or not is really moot to our biggest concern, which is the buffer zone that's been talked about and the impact on the neighborhood around. The comment made by the staff about the fact that they know that it may impact the neighborhood is not accurate, in my opinion, that it will definitely impact the neighborhood, both in terms of traffic count on the intersection, which is already problematic, and also in terms of noise, odors, and light pollution that's going to impact the neighborhood. The existing boundaries and buffers that have been shown in the approved concept plan, whether it's built as it is stated right now or minor modifications are made, will not provide the kind of security or the kind of aesthetic, quiet enjoyment that we anticipated having when we purchased the home. The current plan shows an access point from the retail center, anchored by the grocery store, into Shanamara, providing a pedestrian path and a golf cart path, which immediately makes Shanamara has an open thoroughfare from a public retail center into the neighborhood, and all of the things that can come along with that, many of which are not necessarily to the advantage of a homeowner in Shanamara. That's all I have to
Okay,
say.
thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
So Max, the things that were just mentioned here, really are outside the scope of what the board is considering tonight though, correct? Because that was, your comments were more for the overall development plan, so even if we're sympathetic to that, that's not something that we're considering tonight at
Correct,
all.
understood.
That is correct. I do believe that the plan would be to amend the concept plan if this was let's say that rezoning was approved. Staff would then discuss we would have discussion with the public as well, because they have addressed a lot of concerns, and then talk to the developer to amend some of the buffers according to Shanamara's request.
Right.
But the developer could technically move on with the site plan as is if they like.
So that wouldn't come before us again.
Not unless they did a rezoning or so no.
I know there are concerns, as Mr. Twitchell stated, about the path between the plaza and Shanamara. Is that a requirement or just something that's included in the current plan?
So there is a requirement per ordinance it says like, you shall connect where feasible. So it's a little bit of a gray area, which when it was discussed during the site plan review, I think it always was initially a golf cart path, so I think when it was submitted in 2020, I assume that that's the direction the previous planning director chose, and I do believe that it was gonna be a good benefit to the neighborhood. The people that came out for the community meeting a few weeks ago did not believe so. I do think that we will end up meeting with the developer and the public at some point and discussing that connection.
Okay.
But again, that's
But that's
more
out of our
concerning
hands.
the overall,
Correct.
development, not this
Yeah.
specific item before the board.
It will go
tonight.
it will not come to planning board for decision.
Right.
All right. Would anybody else like to speak?
A little bit of a side note.
Okay.
Very reasonable.
Got one
Oh,
more.
I'm sorry.
Max, yeah.
Yes, no.
Say my name.
Name and address, please.
Roxana Redfern, 723 Donville Court. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Twitchell said. Basically, I know that they seem to, the two aren't necessarily connected, but I just heard about this plan 2 days before the neighborhood meeting. First of all, I did not receive a correspondence, even though I was within the area that you're supposed to get the information. I've had a lot of conversations with the city. I think that I've not been able to get clear understanding up until the neighborhood meeting as to what was happening and what the plan was, what the approvals were, what the timeline was. And in terms of like what Mr. Twitchell said, as far as there are some, there will be some negative impacts to the neighborhood. Everyone that I've connected with feels strongly that there'll be significant negative impacts to the neighborhood. Everyone that I've spoken with is very concerned about our property value. Traffic is a huge concern. Some of the studies that they presented started during COVID. So obviously during COVID there wasn't tons of traffic. There's just a lot of concerns with the neighborhood, and also, of course, the golf cart path, which you addressed. A lot of the homes within Donegal Court that would have direct access to, or the public would have direct access into the neighborhood houses small children. 4 out of 5 houses have small children, and in terms of bringing in the neighborhood as a, how do they say, like an enhancement to the neighborhood, no one even knows about it or was considered in this enhancement that supposedly we will have. Not only that, there's not a lot of outreach into not just Shannamara, but Fairhaven, Krismark. There's a lot of neighborhoods that would be impacted beyond Shannamara that don't even have any idea of this concept approved plan. So again, I know there's 2 things going on, but just wanted to speak my perspective and how I've come about this has been very difficult, but yeah.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
You mentioned that you had heard about it when it came to the meeting and the letter that was sent out the other
I
week.
did not get the letter. A neighbor came to me and told me about it.
Right. And you had said that you had communication previously with the town, or maybe in the interim period where you said you didn't fully understand exactly what was going on?
Yeah, between the 2 days that a neighbor came to me because I did not get the notice and told me, hey, do you know about this? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's when I called the city to ask what was going on. And even the information that I got at that point was vastly different from the information that was talked about during the neighborhood meeting. In terms of that there was no sewer capacity, we didn't need to worry about it, it was way in the distance. That, in terms of like what's approved, that was not very clear. So it was very hard to understand even like what is approved, what is actually happening. A lot of just redirecting to websites and stuff like that. Not a clear outline what was happening, and it was only till I came to the meeting, along with many other neighbors that were at the meeting, that finally were aware of the plan. It's not just me, it was multiple people that were like, what is going on? So, yeah.
Is there more information that you're still looking to find in terms of what the plan is?
In terms of, well, I just heard now that there's also like what is the next, is this an immediate like approved plan? Because I just also heard that a construction site also has to be approved. So is this approved done, or is there another submittal that has to happen? Like, I guess I'm confused there as well.
I think Max could.
I can definitely address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first I wanted to apologize if she didn't get the letter. I know that a lot of people said they did not receive the letter. I did drop the mail off on November 18th to all properties within 500 feet of the site, and after that, it's a little bit out of control, my hands, excuse me, and I apologize. But according to the site plan approval, we have it's called a major site development plan review for a site this large. The first step would be to meet with the staff and discuss your proposal. Then met with previous planning staff prior to me starting with the town as a director, and discuss the site plan and all the amenities and site details. So I don't specifically know what was exactly discussed, so this was on my desk right when I started with the town. Once that concept plan it is approved, that's the first step. The next step would be to submit for construction documents, and they have not done so yet. So it's not, the site is technically approved per the zoning, but not approved through the site plan review process. Once they do the construction documents, they also have to submit a lot of this stuff to the county, which is a completely separate process from the town. I do not know where they are at with the county. But after the construction documents are approved, then comes final plat, which they have to where they would recombine or subdivide the properties and then do the zoning permits. So that's just sort of like a high level process. When I did speak to the public about sewer capacity, I wasn't aware at the time before the community meeting, and I'm not with engineering as well, who knows more about the sewer capacity. I thought this was under a different watershed, which has no capacity. And went to the community meeting, or the neighborhood meeting, I was made aware that the sewer watershed for this site. It's split, and they would be funneling through a different watershed, and so the water and sewer was a little more promising for them, according to the developer. I have not yet spoken to the county about that. So that's a little bit of the history on that.
Just for the, and I know this is not necessarily germane to what we're voting on tonight, but for the members of the public who are here, for things that are by right development, what is the town's obligation for public notice?
There's no ordinance requirements to do public notice for by right developments, and no state statutes as well.
So we're just on the zoning level right now. They
For
haven't
this, yeah.
submitted any kind of designs and,
Correct. For this parcel, yes.
right. So that's at another meeting, another community meeting.
So the
Public meeting.
planning board could make a decision tonight or request more information for next meeting, or it could go ahead and make a vote and move on to council for January 27th.
We're just talking about that one little parcel right there.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I don't think one way or the other, what we would do with this little parcel is gonna alleviate any of the concerns on the overall development, so, yes.
I know this, I don't want to prevent somebody else from speaking there.
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Gretchen Sawickas, and I live at 917 Bailey Court in Shanmura. And it's more of a general question that I have for you that you might be able to answer. We have been in our home in Shanmura since 2003. And when we purchased our home, the land that is directly behind us was a single-family residence. It was zoned single family. And when we purchased it, we were told that we should be fine in that property because it's very difficult to rezone from a single-family residence to something else. And I guess my question is just more general because, as I said, we've been there since 2003, and ever since we've been made aware of this development, we have made sure to come, to these meetings. This is our third meeting that we've attended. And what I'm not understanding is, when the decision was made to do the mass rezoning, it was in our backyard. And we didn't receive any notification. It was nice when we had the big zoning signs up for this property, so everybody knew what was going on. But, and we got a letter, so that was fantastic. And I'm not disputing this property, so I understand that. And thank you for your patience as, we're bringing up these
Well,
other issues.
3 minutes is up, I'll hit the gavel.
All right, but yes, so I'm just curious, what was that process in 2018? That a property in our backyard was rezoned to MU2, and we did not receive any notice about that, so, yes.
I know we're actually not supposed to banter back
Oh.
and forth, like you're supposed to make a statement. And then
Okay,
we're supposed
okay,
to
well,
go,
I'm
"Okay,
done,
that's your
yeah,
statement."
I'm done.
But I will answer you,
Okay, perfect.
but we're not supposed to, or is that a council rule? Council's not
It's a
supposed to.
council rule.
Oh, so it's not our rule. So that council the town council at that time and that town planner at that time, who are all gone, had a different vision for the town than what previous council or current council or planning board has. So it's I think partly your realtor was probably like, buy this house, nothing will happen back here, something will always happen back there. You know what I mean? They just want you to feel good when you're making the purchase. But I think that it's hard for everybody when you're coming in on the end of it when previous town planner, previous council had a completely different vision for the town. And then now it's all said and done and it's just gonna be.
But I know we're not supposed to banter, but can you answer, what was the requirements for notification?
It was, you had to put something in the newspaper
So,
and post something outside of town hall.
So, you're not really telling the residents that, it sounds like. Thank you.
Back then,
I
Yeah.
can make
Yeah.
a comment on that.
And I wasn't part of that, so I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it's sufficient. I'm just telling you what it was.
No, I
don't,
appreciate
I don't
that.
agree with it.
Yeah.
It was just the minimum requirement.
So the minimum requirement for 50 parcels or more in the ordinance is to do a half-page newspaper ad 4 weeks in a row, and also do notices up front. So those are the minimum requirements, and those were legally met, and there's been 2 determinations by legal, 2 different attorneys that is valid. But, you know, there was lots of planning processes that were documented prior to this, and I know that these residents were not aware, and I don't make any excuses for the notifications, but there were a lot of different meetings for these rezonings.
They
There was
did, they
also,
had them at the elementary school
we
all the
had
time. and they
200
would-
people in attendance.
And they would come to the elementary school and like they had models.
Yeah.
And people from the town would come and be like, yes, this looks great, do it. So people and they did a survey
Mhm. So,
of what people from the town
according to
wanted.
the documentation,
Wow.
what was done was
Yeah,
every single neighborhood in town at the time actually had a sign out front about these rezonings. Additionally, on top of that, we had 200 people in attendance for those meetings. There was also multiple meetings for the small area plans and the future land use plan adoption as well. That did describe that the rezoning was going to happen. And I don't make any excuses for the public outreach and not getting notified. I don't know what happened on that. Just like the previous resident said that she was not mailed a notice after, you know, I did drop those off myself, and I have some mail notices that were returned with the stamped date that it was mailed out with. I don't know how those things happen at that time. So there's a lot of loose and gray area on that, but I do wanna I don't make any excuses for them not to know.
I just don't want y'all to be frustrated with Max or with whoever because he wasn't here, we weren't here. And I do remember the meetings, that were open to the public at the elementary school where they invited the town to come in and say, what would you like to see in the town? And everybody said, yes, this looks, and also at, Stallings Fest. There's always a booth at Stallings Fest where there's plans for the town and residents are invited to come by and see like what the plan is and give your feedback and your input.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with the development, I'm just saying,
No, and I appreciate that, but
People
you
have
said
been
that there were signs
asked
in
their
front of the neighborhood, there was no sign in front of our neighborhood. And we're the property is like right
I
in
don't
our
wanna get into an
backyard.
argument, or, I'm not saying argument, I'm just saying I don't know exactly.
what happened back then?
What happened
We
back
weren't
then.
here.
Thank you.
But the bottom line is that the next step, they will have a voice in the community meetings about the design of the project.
I believe that's the intent of the developer
Correct.
to do so, but
That's not required.
the next step would be to go to council
Mhm.
for the rezoning,
Right.
and I do believe that they would amend the concept plan and talk to the public on that.
Right.
But they would not be required to do so.
So,
So, if I could, do you want me to approach it?
yes, please.
Thank you. And I'll try to be efficient. So one of you had made a mention about that it's moot, is it going to be, a residential area that's gonna be, oddly bracketed by a retail center? But there is an argument from, at least my point of view, for residents in that area to not approve it as being MU mixed use, because doing so, although it is not specific to the grocery anchored development, there is another large parcel or parcels of land that is owned by the same company or an associate company
Mhm.
that actually is on the intersection. And the potential proposed use for that intersection is a gas station, and/or a fast food drive-through food service.
Mhm.
So by converting that one parcel from SFR to MU would allow the developer to reorient the current access and egress to that center and provide more opportunity and space closer to the intersection for either larger drive bays or larger access points for those two potential uses, which just creates more problem and more pressure on the arterials that feed that intersection. So I just wanted to bring that
Thank you.
up. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I more so have a question. So I think you guys have mentioned that a lot of this was previous to the planning board and Max's time, but you had mentioned, will the residents have, or the community have a voice in this? And because it's, I guess, a by right, we wouldn't. Is there anything that can be done to, now that there's kind of a more of awareness, to require the, council, I don't know, the powers that be, to make sure that nothing is approved or can move forward until there is the communication between the residents and multiple other communities that aren't still aware, because Shanmar is the only one right now that's aware. So is there something that can be done to kind of rectify some of the, lack of awareness for the residents that order the approved plan?
Council?
I would suggest that be at the council level.
Yeah, council.
So their next meeting, just for everyone's notice, is when?
So if planning board decides to make a decision on this rezoning and not meet in January about it, then the next planned meeting would be January 27th, but the mayor has to approve that agenda. So that's why it's TBD. He has to approve every item on the agenda.
So the council would be the ones that you should speak with.
And are they, because I've sent a lot of emails, but no responses.
None of them have responded?
Only the mayor has.
They're really, really good about responding.
I don't
I'll
control that.
I'll ask for myself. They're really good about responding.
I've sent to David Scholl and to Drake and.
Oh, okay, let's, email, Steve and Brad and Lori.
Okay, I just didn't know, like, in terms, I was looking at the map, which was also, so I was just trying to see the council members that are zoned or assigned to them.
It's
I'm just
split.
learning.
I gotcha, yeah, you
Yeah.
emailed like the two closest ones, gotcha.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Right, because ultimately, we're an advisory board to them, so our vote just sends it to them. We're not necessarily saying yes or no that this is going to happen, so then it goes to them, they get to deliberate on it. So your ability to reach out to them can help shape their
decision
thinking on
making.
making the final decision on it.
Okay,
Yeah,
And-
the,
go ahead.
they're the only ones that really can change the ordinance and
Right.
rules.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So is it recommended to, because I know that, there's a few of us here, but there's a lot more that were at the neighborhood meeting that, probably couldn't, because of Christmas and all that, couldn't, make this here and that are, have the same sentiment. Should we coordinate to all send emails to council members, like, I don't know, I'm trying to get like advice about what steps to take here.
Yeah, I would think that, plus attend the meeting,
Okay,
and more.
The more you can bring to the council,
Yeah.
okay,
definitely.
all right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we can move on now. Okay. We have a motion. That was,
Let me ask you a question to Max and maybe possibly the developers. The plan that we're looking at here, where we see like, a grocery store and out parcels and parking, is this just like a soft proposal, or is this like what is currently approved? That they could like go forward exactly as, this is proposed? And if this rezoning tonight gets recommended for council to approve that the board approves it, how much flexibility would it offer the developers for changes to what's already been approved?
So I'll address a little bit about the
Kind of going through, we had a mention of, drive-through fast food and gas stations.
So
Even though that's not on this current plan, what is the feasibility that could be a reality?
So the approved concept plan is, I don't know if you can see the mouse, but it's within this boundary right here. the site plan's gonna largely look exactly like that during the construction document review phase. They'll probably change very minor amendments to the concept plan review. But it would be up to the developer if they wanna do any changes to the concept plan review. But this, it'll look very similar to this.
What's the process of that as far as, does it go back to council for approval?
It does not.
It does not, okay.
It's only at staff level for the
Okay,
site
staff level,
development
but
plan
it
review.
does have to go
Yeah.
through some sort of review then?
It does. So it's reviewed by Union County, Stallings, Planning and Zoning, and Stallings Engineering.
But no additional opportunities for public feedback after
At
going forward?
As far as I'm aware, the public, once it's a by right development, the public doesn't provide the input for site plan reviews. There's a lot of different steps in the process, and so my understanding is that it would require a professional to go through those site development plan reviews. So they could build this concept plan and could submit that as construction documents and build the development very similar to this without addressing this rezoning parcel or that's out parcels for a development agreement for the drive-through and residential gas station use. So they could go ahead and build this.
But being a
or
general, but being a
continuous-
general rezoning, if that gets approved, then that kind of
they would change
takes
their concept
away
plan.
staff and everybody. I mean, it's anything that's allowed in that zoning, they can do without any further approvals.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
One more? I have to
One
leave
more.
in a few minutes. Go.
Did you have a question?
No, I have to leave in a few minutes, as I coach the middle school swim team, so I'm gonna use the bathroom while you're talking, and then I'll come back that way.
You know what I'll
I
say.
can vote.
Good evening, Jeannie Lindsay, 5639 Anglesey Court. And I'll agree with my neighbor's concerns about safety and security and so forth. And I just want to correct and clarify a little bit of a point about the mass rezoning, which doesn't necessarily pertain to your decision tonight, but for those of you that weren't here, that rezoning happened without any public notice. There was no letters to adjacent properties. Mine is one for the Stinson Farms because I'm on Anglesey Court, and there were no signs put out at that point, and there were no zoning hearings. So even though there's talk of a couple of attorneys having signed off on that, having been legitimate, I would agree with a former council woman who said that that may have been in keeping with the law, but not necessarily the spirit of the law. That the folks didn't know that was going on. I remember Heather's talking about what was going on at the elementary school. I attended some of those meetings, as many as I could, with real young kids shortly after we moved here. That was about 9 or 10 years ago. That was called, at the time, Stallings 101. It wasn't billed as a rezoning thing that was going on. It was more of how the town works and how things happen. So what would have been presented at that point would have been very concept-based in terms of the small area plans. I don't remember the public necessarily having input on that. It's more of a presentation on how the town functions. So in general, moving forward, I would really like to see the town give a lot more information, maybe go back to having the convenient interactive map on the website with the full list of all the things that are planned. It really does feel like a breakneck speed, that things are changing and it's hard to keep track of. But it does impact, it's certainly more than just 500 feet, and I think it's become the norm that we have these public community meetings with no one in attendance. In some cases, that 500 feet is still the applicant's own property, and that happened with some of what was going on in Stinson Farms when they were rezoning a small parcel over by Marshall Hooks, at the corner of Idlewild and Marshall Hooks. They held a meeting, and of course, what do you know, no one was in attendance because 500 feet was still remaining in their property. So that wording could definitely be changed, and I would ask the planning board to please put together some new wording that would be more transparent for the whole town, and some better information on the website, especially on the homepage of upcoming changes that we can expect. A lot of things have really fallen off the radar
including, the industry expansion on Idlewild that will play into all of the traffic woes that we already have. So, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a motion to approve or just,
Well, I just wanted to say, as a resident of Shanamara myself, I appreciate the input from everybody tonight, because I know, and we were talking about this before the meeting started, especially at certain times of day, that intersection at Idlewild and Stevens Mill does get rather crowded and backed up, and you're sitting there at the light going, when am I going to get through this light? But also understanding that the town council has the objective and to continue to bring commercial property into the town. So I would like to vote to move this to council and have it presented to them. I'm assuming there will be more feedback at that meeting if it is on the agenda at the 27th. And as a whole, be able to present it to them to say, have this sink or swim in its entirety. I'm picturing in my mind, do you remember that picture when Mick Jagger was here a couple years ago and he's sitting at that bar, I forget the name of it, in Uptown, the one that's surrounded by apartment buildings on all three sides? I'm picturing that property in this instance. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I very much sympathize with, any lack of transparency that's happened in the past, and, we'll support any efforts going, and it's outside of the power of this board, but, fully support any further, making communication more efficient and expedient with the residents of Stallings. So, but I also agree that, I think I support moving this forward to council.
do I have a second? Is that a motion?
Sure.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
It would be a statement of reasonable.
I have a question, just for presentation's sake to council, is that a recommendation
To approve.
to approve?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
just want to make sure.
No, we need to do
Reasonable.
yes. Mason, you said, staff found this to be inconsistent but reasonable.
Inconsistent and reasonable, it was previously rezoned,
Right,
zoned to
right.
mixed use too, and it was a.
So I move that we find that this is inconsistent but reasonable with the land use plan.
Okay, all in favor?
We need a second.
I'll
Second.
I'll second.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming, guys.
Good luck.